The Price is Right has been a television staple for as long as most of us can remember. Anyone who's ever spent an afternoon watching TV in the last few decades has likely been sucked into an episode or two of this venerable daytime game show. And while Bob Barker held the reins as host for much of his long career, Drew Carey has established himself as a worthy successor since taking on the role in 2007. Anyone who's watched Carey do his thing might have noticed there's a fun thing that happens whenever a contestant makes a really excellent initial bid. Whenever they guess the actual retail price correctly, Drew ends up personally adding to their winnings by grabbing $500 from his pocket and giving it to them. And while that might seem like it's not an extraordinarily large amount when compared to the big prizes on the show, it has added up. In fact, did you know Drew has given out roughly $200,000 in cash from his pockets over the course of his hosting duties? That's a pretty hefty sum. Hopefully the show's providing that cash and Drew doesn't have to dig into his hosting salary. In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into some fun facts about The Price is Right you might not know about. Stick around as Facts First presents Secrets about The Price is Right. Wardrobe malfunction. Considering The Price is Right airs pretty much every day, it comes as no surprise that over the course of the many years it's been on, there's been a wardrobe malfunction. It's almost surprising there haven't been more, but the most notable wardrobe malfunction happened in 1977. In those days, tube tops were in vogue. They're a fun but potentially revealing clothing choice. Women who opt for a tube top when they go on national television probably need to be extra careful with their movement, for fear the tube might come off their top. Such was the case for one unfortunate contestant. When her name was called, signaling she was the next contestant, she jumped up with exuberance. A little too much exuberance. Her sudden movement caused her tube top to pop off, revealing a lot more than the audience or host Bob Barker was expecting. She quickly readjusted her top to cover up and continued her walk down the aisle towards Barker. Fortunately, Bob was a consummate professional and took it in stride. He jokingly said he'd never had a welcome quite like that. And everyone, including the very embarrassed contestant, laughed. Hair today, gone tomorrow. When most of us picture Bob Barker in our mind, we likely see an older gentleman with gray hair and a long, skinny microphone. But what many people don't realize is Barker actually had dark brown hair in his youth, and the hair was still brown for much of his hosting time. As he started to go gray, he did what most men in Hollywood do. He started dyeing it. So for a while, his hair stayed the same color artificially. But eventually he decided he wanted to stop dyeing it. It's unclear whether it was because he found it inauthentic or because it was simply too annoying to keep going. But regardless, he was sick of the dyed hair color. The problem was, there were almost no men on TV at the time with gray hair, and this was especially true of hosts. Barker actually had to convince the top brass at the network that if he let audiences see his natural gray hair color, they wouldn't decide to turn the channel. After a bit of convincing, Barker was given permission to stop dyeing his hair. And obviously he was correct that it wouldn't turn audiences off. Barker became more and more loved and famous over the years, and his iconic look included his natural gray hair. Replacing a legend. To many people, Drew Carey feels like a natural successor to the venerable Bob Barker. Carey's been brilliant in his hosting capacity, and fans have found the transition a seamless one, and Carey has also been hosting for many years now. So clearly he was the first and only choice, right? Not so fast. The network actually had a long and exhaustive search to find the right replacement. They first went after names like George Hamilton and Mario Lopez. John O'Hurley was also on the list, but none of those names ended up working out. Some said no, others weren't a right fit. Then Rosie O'Donnell sought out the job, garnering Bob Barker's endorsement in the process. You'd think that would have been enough to get an audition, but the network was against it from the get-go, so Rosie never got an audition. Another surprising omission from the list was longtime Nickelodeon host Mark Summers. Mark, for whatever reason, wasn't brought in. Eventually, after many offers, auditions, and debate, they went with Drew Carey, but clearly it was worth the wait. Get ready to wait. It might seem like a quick and easy process to get on The Price is Right. You just get tickets online and show up, right? But it's actually more complicated than that. A big reason is that the audience is much more a part of the show than on most game shows. Not only are contestants drawn from the studio audience, but the rest of the audience gets a decent amount of screen time too. And when they aren't being seen, they're being heard, shouting out advice. So it's vital to have a crowd that's full of energy, and even more important to have contestants who will have that X factor of being energetic and fun to watch. Audience members have to line up hours in advance on the street outside the studio lot. As they wait, members of the Price is Right production staff will occasionally pop out to see who in the line is showing a certain energy and sparkle. Then they're eventually led into the studio 10 at a time. Each group is presented to the producers where they're given questions to get a sense of who they are, what they're like, and what they might be like as contestants. But before you start thinking it's a job interview where there are right answers, it's a lot less complicated. Producer Stan Blitz is on record as saying mostly what he looks for is energy. If a potential contestant can match his high energy in their interview, they're a lot more likely to get on the show as a contestant. Squeaky clean image. One of the reasons The Price is Right was able to stand out early on was because of its lack of scandals. In the early days of game shows, there were a ton of them, so it was hard to stand out in the crowd. As such, producers became willing to bend the rules just to get ahead. Some of the famous shows of the 50s included The $64,000 Question, Dotto, and 21 Questions. Each of these shows eventually became embroiled in major scandals, as it was revealed that contestants were being aided by producers. This was because producers and networks knew that audiences were riveted when a person had long-running success. Thus, their ratings would go up if they had people winning a lot, especially if it was one person who would also become a celebrity in their own right. But eventually, all of those shows were found out. There were even congressional hearings that looked into game shows in the 50s, helping contestants win. As such, the popularity of these shows plummeted, and before too long, they were off the air. But one show that never had any scandals, or even strong rumors of one, was The Price is Right. It's maintained a squeaky clean image for decades. Viewers who had been disillusioned by the cheating in the other shows at the time discovered the earnest and honest gameplay that The Price is Right was offering and found it appealing. The show has kept that squeaky clean image over the years, building up trust amongst audiences for decades. Obviously, after being on the air for so many years, there are a ton of behind-the-scenes secrets that are fun to find out about The Price is Right. These are only a smattering of them, but hopefully you enjoyed a bit of a peek behind the curtain, or should we say behind the Plinko board. The show has a timeless quality that has appealed to people from the mid-20th century well into the 21st century. It's easy to watch and fun to play along. And if you ever get a chance to attend a taping, you'll be talking about it for the rest of your life. Now it's time to hear from you. Who's your favorite Price is Right host? Bob Barker or Drew Carey? Let us know in the comments section below.